Okay, welcome. Thank you. That was incredible. What an afternoon. What a day. To have opened with my good friend Raul Mejotra, and now with this Latin American session, which is so good because my heart is in Latin America, although my archive is now in Zurich. Okay. So let's go to the world. This is a map was developed along with Harvard, Christian Vertman, John Beardsley. We helped them out with the pixelation of the growth of population 2030. And what you see, the orange dots, are exactly where the world population will go, and it'll grow mostly in the south. And when you see the deformations, that's the concentration of the areas. But more than that, it'll grow mostly in slums. That's the most important thing. So I was raised with one foot in Venezuela, the other foot in the US. So I've always been aware of truth and the falsities of binaries, like developed and undeveloped, east, west, north, south. But let's look at a little bit of that world we saw in the first presentation today. And as we enter Bangalore from the airport. And what you see is these wonderful little communities on the outside of Bangalore as it develops. But then you see up there, Bookaville in peace and serenity. This is going to be wiped out. And you see more billboards as it goes, as you're traversing your way. A life full of privilege awaits you. And this American image. So what the problem is the aspiration. What is the aspiration of the urbanized world? What are we selling? What are people buying? Who is that aspiration for? Americans have been watching protests against oppressive regimes that concentrate massive wealth in the hands of an elite few. Yet in our own democracy, the United States primarily, 1% of the people take nearly a quarter of the nation's income. An inequality even the wealthy will come to regret. So how do you see it? Do you see the world half empty, half full with the prosperity? Well, let's look. So what's the city? The city is a very complex place. But as these flows of capital land in the developing world, or let's say in the global south, as Saskia Sassen has called it, we find that these projects are dividing, are destroying communities, are isolating. These projects are factor about 300 developers around the world and banks that are all in the thing. These are projects taken by board directors who have no concern where it's going to land, these gated communities. They forget it's all about the people. Cities are about people. And this is what I believe is a required tourism for all of us. To go to Calcutta, to stand here on Howard's Bridge, to feel the density of people, of 380 million people which are moving into urban areas in Asia, Africa, and South America. But who are these people? They are young. If we start to look at the demographics, we're going to find that in 2030, for every one European between the ages of 15 and 25, there will be 8 Africans in that same age range. So where are they going to go? They're going to go up north and look for work, right? But what's the city? What are buildings? And we'll talk about that with Torre David later on. What's the city? People. Because architecture there that's voided out means nothing without people. What's an empty building? It has no impact. So these became our first clients. My nanny, her son, her grandson, the woman who worked in the kitchen, the boy who ran the motorcycle. And these became our first clients. We began giving goalposts and clothing as an NGO. In this photograph, you see a sports event that we gave out titles. Well, 4 of these guys are now dead. Unfortunately, we went back to visit and we asked, and they're no longer around. So in our work of the last 15 years, we've been bringing people down to Caracas. You see Ricky Burdett there from London School of Economics. You see Sarah Ishioka from the Foundation of Architecture. And here they are looking at the redeemers, the people who say they're doing social change. Well, it's not true, I tell you. I'm living a hell right now in Venezuela. But confronted with that, we began to say, so how as designers can we go in? We were trained at Columbia University, and we had to relearn everything that we knew at that point. To understand why, to interpret what we were going to do, to act where, to identify with who. And so we began. Here you see a young Hubert, this is my partner, wearing our Manifesto t-shirt. This didn't win us very many friends in Caracas. The Manifesto basically is a Manifesto No. Today I'd probably do a Manifesto C. Basically says we didn't come here to follow courses of diplomacy. We didn't come to acquire a culture with comfortable ends. We came here to confront ourselves with the urban problems. And it goes on and on and on. The university where we were teaching was not too happy with that. So this is the reality. If you don't fly over the valleys of Caracas, you won't see it. Caracas is a hilly topography, but this no one was discussing in the university. The big topic in the university was the Bilbao effect. Bilbao and Gary's building was all what the university wanted to talk about. Well, we began this idea of social design, youth-based design. Youth became the real thing. We wanted to debunk the myths of marginality, that informal settlements were not a problem but the solution. They were the de facto solution because the governments couldn't deal with housing. We had wanted to confront the cultural crisis that Pedro talked about so much, no? And we wanted to unlearn what we had been taught. We'd been taught to cut hills, move earth, embodied energy that no one was going to recuperate. There was no sustainable development here. And when we saw this, we said, wow, this is light. It uses the resources, the cheapest resources. It is more sustainable. It's actually a community of sustainability. We began to identify the idea of the growing house, the same house, 5 years difference. We began to chart out 25 years of a process of building your own house. You see it now finished there with a little balcony finish. We started to think about micro loans for urban settlements, etc., and what we called the growing house. But the reality is we began to map, critical mapping, so we could use it as a political instrument. We became kind of activists, guerrilla architects, if you want. And using the same tactics, which was the vocabulary of our revolutionary government, right? And so we mapped out the growth of slums up to 2005, is that map. The first time it was evident, 60% of the population of Caracas was living in slums on 40% of the territory. We began to look at the great modern piece of architecture, the Domino House, Le Corbusier. This house actually was a social intention, the Domino House. 1914, a solution for industrialized social housing. But he drew it intentionally without the walls because he wanted the cheapest available material to infill those walls. Well, that's become the modern structure of all of the global south, right? And in fact, in Greece, if you leave the columns still standing, you don't have to pay taxes, right? So basically, the world is being built this way. The majority world, what Raul referred to this morning, this is the majority world. But this is one of the urban pirates. This is Horacio Genaro, who built Petare, an incredible settlement. And these are the process of cutting the hill, banking it, parceling it out. We call them urban pirates. And this is the same Petare Hill over time, part of our research of the mapping. But what we want to do is not the triangle, but actually the square, is to re-knit together architects, NGOs, universities, and industries, all back together into kind of a bond. We have to rethink, like Lefebvre says, rethink the city, the university of the city, because the city's complex. And if we try and simplify it the way developers want to simplify in parcel land and development, we're ruining the complexity of what cities are all about. This kinetic city that Raul talked about in the beginning. So we began doing these small projects, dry toilets, because up on the hillsides of these slums, there was very bad water connection. You could bring water up with pressure, but how do you get water down? So as you saw also this morning, the UN wants to measure poverty in terms of how many toilets per person. They want to get it down 1 toilet to every 50. Toilets is a big project to think about, but composting toilets. Right? So we're able to build the first composting toilet together with Lia Tesakov, you see her there in the picture, and Maritika Potrik. We brought artists down to work with us. More than 30 artists came down. In fact, culture is a way to do things, right? Artists are almost untouchable. Un proyecto de arte. It's an art project. Then you can get through the government, right? So there's the dry toilet, and now it's a beautiful composting garden. They changed the buckets of compost, and they have a little shower, and they collect the rainwater. But then we figured out we had to bridge this terrain. So we created these stair systems that don't secure themselves to any wall, and they're flexible. They can twist and turn. And as you see here, connecting schools and houses. And we can bridge over highways or bridge over from one neighborhood to the next. And then informal vendors on a little ramp system going up to these bridges. These were all the first projects. And this is kind of an alphabet that I'm presenting you, going vertical. And then we thought, can we make the community house, the vertical, can we do the slum in vertical, the same association around, because a slum house or the street becomes the public way. So can we bring the street up through the building? Can we make little workshops within the building, theater places, daycare centers, and create clusters of apartments? And so we call this the growing house. It can be connected to a hill anywhere, and we're trying to get that built right now in Caracas. And then we went on. A friend of ours had an autistic child, and she was quite desperate. We solicited the city for a piece of property. It was the worst piece of property you can imagine. And so Autistic Children's School would have to be very horizontal, no walking upstairs, but we couldn't do anything about it. So we used that property. We rethought the model of how an autistic children's school, kids can't go upstairs and they can't go in elevators because they get claustrophobic. So we made the whole building a ramp, a kind of Guggenheim. And not only that, do they get exercise? We later learned because they calm them down as they're going to classroom, but they look at the classrooms before they've arrived. They look around into it from different angles, and they feel much more secure once they've arrived. So this is the FAVA Autistic Children's School, made with very cheap materials. The ramp system, you see one teacher for every 2 children going up to the classrooms. Everything's transparent. They can look in, they look into their music hall, and then they arrive at the gym on the very top. We're going vertical. In a place, a sports field, where only 6 against 6 played. Soccer, in the rainy season, they wanted a roof. We said, forget the roof. We went to the mayor. We said to the mayor, let's build 4 floors of gymnasium. And he said, oh, but they don't need it. Well, it proved us right, because the gym, which is a kit of parts, can be fabricated in any industry and then brought on site and constructed in 3 months. This was the original playing field. And this is the steel parts coming on site, the finished gym. The inside has a 24-hour programming, used all day, all night, and children, getting married there, chess, every kind of activity. It's a multi-court, and on the roof, a little football multi-court also. From 6 on 6, the building now has a record of 15,000 users, repeated users per month. Now there's a few of them being built all around Caracas at the moment. But mobility is the big issue. So that we had the hill, so we went up in scale from dry toilets to stairs to gyms. Now we wanted to tackle the big issue. Mobility is the great democratizer. Mobility of connecting the informal with the formal, so the poorest neighborhoods with the richest neighborhoods. So we took a very significant slum in the entrance. We proposed to the mayor. It took us 10 years with the community to convince the mayor that this had to be done. As we showed him the stairs, people walking up during the rainy season, 39 floors on average. But the mayor said, no, we'll build a road. Fantastic. Corruption is what's killing us, right? Because he would get big kickbacks from the builders. In this case, we made a map showing how the houses had been upgraded, that red map. That's the critical mapping. And the upgrade is the invisible capital that Hernando de Soto talks about. And we actually mapped that even more, where that upgrade had been. These are the hills. And we started to design the stations, but also with social functions attached. So they would become the new plazas in very hilly terrain, all serviced by ramp systems, no elevators, always cheap. We don't care how buildings are finished with what materials, as long as it's what's available. But what we do, and what we like to say we do, the urban thinking, is create the structure, the kind of framework in which people can plug in, transform. So this is now the whole ring. you have the metro line below, you fly up into the air 3 stations above, and you fly back down. And all along the ring are all these social programs that we've been able to develop. So forget about utopia. This is a dispatch from the front lines of our urban planet, one urbanized planet. This is a logbook entry from the Petri dish of social transformation as a vast modernizing landscape. So today, in absence of the utopias and failed dreams of the 50s, car metropolis, we search for an alternative urbanism, an ideal to follow, actually to keep the city with tight-knit communities. Do not let the car take it over. And we also believe in bringing to these communities culture. And in this case, we have a fantastic friend, is Dudamel. He's leading now the Los Angeles Philharmonic, and he organized a concert in La Vega. The turnout was spectacular with classical music, and that we started to figure out, let's see if we can then make something to put inside this area. And this is the site. And when we saw this, we said, fantastic. If we can make a piece of building that's an infrastructure, because we cannot plan the rest. The rest works as best as it can. But if we could make it like an urban generator there in the middle, we could network a series of urban generators, right? And we got this piece of land. It was where mudslides were happening. We had to analyze very well the earth, and we made a building that actually has to work with the landscape, intimately connected. It's a music school, and it will be a music school run by the community, completely handed over to the community leaders. But it works, it recuperates the rainfall that falls down, it cleans it in tanks, it reutilizes it in the air system of the building, and solar panels, so it's completely off the grid. Here you see it, it just uses very basic materials to be finished. And you can now walk up the building and come across and connect to the higher levels. Reuse, this is the new thing. Grand Horizonte is, now we're working on looking at the state of the urban planet, the Gran Horizon, the great horizon of the urbanized world. You maybe saw it in Venice, the beginning of this project. Last summer when we made the cafe, a little bit like Gordon Matta Clark, the common ground was the theme of the last Biennale, and we said, so what brings people common ground? What brings them together? So we created a restaurant in the Arsenale. It was illegal until they found out, and actually they loved it because people were eating arepas, they were feeling the music. We had all kinds of exhibition of the state of Caracas on the walls, and in one particular, the Tower of David, La Torre David, which is an icon of a building in the city. And what was this all about? This was about the mutual and ever-changing interaction between subject people and object architecture. This is the Tower of David. It represents the symbol of prosperity, of oil wealth, and of failure, of the modernization of Caracas. It looks like a slum from the outside, but I tell you it's not. It's an incredible reuse of an office building that was left standing unfinished in government hands because the government had acquired it, and people slowly, after several mudslides and rainslides, occupied, and now 750 families are living inside and organized by an evangelic church. Now the building's standing there right in the middle, but the interesting thing about this model, this building, is how it works with its environment. It's 1 kilometer around. What it is, it's actually having all the informal vendors of the area of the 1 kilometer are living inside the building with their little carts, their little mini buses, and then they go out every day and they create all kinds of work opportunities around. In the beginning, they began to settle with tents inside, but soon after walls, and then finishes like any middle-class apartment as you would see anywhere around. All done with their own finances, with their own microfinance. So it was a great lesson. And they used the parking garage as the elevator. The building has no elevator. So you pay $1 to this guy. He brings all of your things up. There are barber shops inside. It is a city. Fabrication. And we analyze this in our book, which Torre David, Informal Vertical Communities. The red part is the part that's occupied of the building. The top portion is not. This is an analysis of the whole system of circulation. These are all the micro systems of water tanks that are pumping from one place to the other. We're thinking that the important thing architects should focus on, we should liberate zoning in cities. Basically, the blocks are going to be fine. Whatever materials people use will be interesting. People will build by approximation. That's why the slums all look very similar. Why? They're more homogeneous than the rest of the city. Why? Because they use the same materials. They understand the same measurements of beams and things. So I believe that if we liberate zoning, you will get a very uniform city, more uniform, and create micro systems, right? So we all go off the grid. Finally, the image was the parking garage as a called urban agriculture, the top of the building that's unused as a wind farm, and public elevators right down to the street, making clusters in the building with public streets. The book that it's outside, and yes, UTT needs you because we survive on students, grants, and help from friends. Thank you very much.